Awesome. Module 5, as we pass the first quarter of the class, moving on to the second. Spring break is 3 weeks away. This chapter is a lot about undercover stuff. For example, working undercover is the process used to acquire information without the individual or the suspect knowing the true identity of the investigator. This can be done with things like background checks, building a profile through reconnaissance methods online, through surveillance, monitoring a suspect's residence, movements, daily routine, chat rooms, user groups, all that kind of stuff to build a behavioral profile, and sting operations uh, designed to catch the criminal in the act of committing or planning to commit a crime. It is not difficult for a detective to create what's called a sock puppet or an undercover identity to perform recon on a suspect or use in a sting operation. There are tons of things where you can create your own fake name. You can use the this person does not exist to create a profile picture, and you can use email, text. You could do financial VPNs. You can do all kinds of stuff to mask your identity, to mask who you truly are as an investigator when you are working undercover. Law enforcement also uses what's called LEAP, or the Local Number Portability Enhanced Analytical Program, to track criminals who try to evade investigation by switching phone carriers. Like it uses tools like reverse lookings. Of course, as long as they have the rights, they can also do wiretaps. The dark web, which is always deemed as something super scary and unknown. It's not really, it's just unindexed. The World Wide Web, or the clear web in this case, is easy to use with traditional browsers because most things are indexed. You can use any search engine to go after and find information. It's easy to access. It's not hiding behind another protocol. It's a piece of cake. The unindexed part of the web is what's called the dark web, because it's encrypted while using the public internet. But in and of itself, it's not scary or threatening or mysterious like people like to frame it. There are tremendous amounts of resources that you can use to find information through open source intelligence. The OSINT framework is a site that gives you a chart like this, where you can really dig down to find what tool you can use to find what you're looking for. It is a great resource. OSINT framework, highly recommend. Of course, there is the Onion router, Tor, the free open source and open network that allows users to surf anonymously. And I put that anonymously with a little asterisk. Users can download the Tor browser bundle to connect via proxies to the Tor network. Websites that aren't normally accessible through the clear web, like dark web sites, can be accessed this way. It is somewhat problematic for investigators because identities are somewhat obfuscated and the site's locations are typically unknown. Yes, it is known to conduct criminal activities and breeding ground for malware, but let me just be clear that people use Pastebin, which is a ClearNet site, to put up all kinds of information, malware, and so on. So it is not just the dark web. That's the only place where people put up malicious stuff or do malicious things. It happens over the clear web all the time. Tails is otherwise known as the Amnesic Incognito Live System. It provides anonymity for the user since it boots from USB and it doesn't leave any records left on things like RAM, on the hard drive, doesn't leave any footprint of its use, and does connect to Tor right away. Another tool similar to Tor is the Invisible Internet Project. Uses public-private key encryption with websites hosted anonymously. On the suspect's computer, you'll find a router.config, which contains information about the connectivity. And any I2P files are associated with this network. There's also the Secure Drop, an open submission system funded by the Freedom of the Press Foundation for whistleblowers to communicate with journalists. There's dark web marketplaces that have come up and down. For example, one of the more famous is the Silk Road. It was used by criminals to sell drugs, counterfeit documents, other illegal stuff using Bitcoin. It took a while, but it was taken down by the FBI and Homeland Security. But being it the internet, more just pop up. If you shut one down, more pop up. Operation Bayonet was used to shut down two marketplaces, Alphabay and Hansa. One of them was European, and I believe the other one was in Asia. This is really a show of the world law enforcement can team up together to take down these criminal sites. And again, just because they're on the unindexed dark web doesn't mean they're immune to the law. You know, if they're doing criminal activity, they're going to get caught. It's always just a matter of time. Virtual currencies. Normally we work with fiat currency, which is legal tender backed by a government or governments like the US dollar or the euro. Virtual currencies are non-state sponsored currencies that are sent from one device to another, and it's only transferred once. An algorithm is solved by a middleman or a miner. A public ledger of transactions assures the integrity of the transactions. Not all virtual currencies are cryptocurrencies, like a Second Life, which uses Linden dollars. Virtual currencies carry tax consequences in different jurisdictions, such as the US, where the IRS will consider a Bitcoin miner as a money service business. Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, decentralized peer-to-peer virtual currency. It is not illegal in the US and can be used for anything from totally benign to nefarious uses, just like real money. The currency uses Bitcoin wallets to store the currency, with many to choose from are encrypted with like SHA-256 with a public-private key. Investigators would need to search for anything like a wallet.dat file on a suspect device to find a wallet. A Bitcoin miner will solve a mathematical problem requiring tremendous computing power before forwarding the Bitcoin currency to the recipient. In return, the miner will receive a small percentage of Bitcoin for solving the algorithm. The blockchain is an electronic public ledger that keeps track of all Bitcoin transactions or blocks. Although publicly visible, determining who is responsible for each transaction is problematic without knowing the date and time of a transaction and knowing the identities of the people. Each block can also be a combination of user transactions. Criminals will use services like Bitcoin Tumbler to mix up their transactions with others or convert one cryptocurrency to another. Venmo and Vicemo are also two peer-to-peer services that law enforcement can use to get information. But honestly, just because people use Bitcoin and try to hide themselves doesn't mean they can hide completely. You know, it is always possible to find information. For example, with Bitcoin, you just have to, for example, wiretap and watch the blockchain. You start seeing things that are happening in order, then you can start drawing up that profile. Nothing is 100% secure. Nothing is 100% anonymous. You can't hide from the law. You just simply can't, because sooner or later you will get caught. And us as investigators, it's our job to help find those criminals, to help sift through the evidence to point to what's important and necessary for the prosecution or defense to use. Online reconnaissance can vary greatly depending on the needs of the investigator. Many websites provide basic information, and you could use all kinds of sites like the ones provided by OSINT to get more information, like personal information, interesting groups, instant messaging, social media, using protocols, all kinds of information you can grab from the web. The Wayback Machine can also be a great source for getting information, because you can look at historical snapshots of a site. So if a criminal was using a site and it was backed up by the Wayback Machine, you can use that. Online crime, which happens all the time, can happen with things like identity theft, which can happen without the need to know a user's password. With enough open source intelligence knowledge, a password can be reset with the information gathered. That's where MFA comes into place. Credit cards for sale happens all the time. Electronic medical records, they're actually more valuable than social security numbers on the black market. Counterfeit and counter-proliferation investigations with things that are being exported or imported. Cyberbullying and social media. These are all online crimes that, as investigators, you may have to investigate, depending on what happens in your organization, or if you're working for law enforcement, whatever case comes up. These are things that you will need to be aware of. Any questions? What do people do with medical records? They can impersonate. They can use to blackmail. They can do all kinds of things, all kinds of extortion to a person with medical records. Could find out what ailments they have and try to fish them by saying, hey, we know you use this medicine, but you can use this for cheaper if you give us your financial info. You can get really crafty with that information. Any other questions? Okay.